I thought I knew my husband. 38 years of marriage, 2 kids raised together, a life built brick by brick. But when he sold my little cabin for $75,000 without asking me, without even a warning, I realized I'd been married to a stranger. His family cheered like he'd just won the lottery. His mother kissed his cheek. His brother slapped his back. And he looked at me across that crowded living room and said, "Dinner's covered from the sold cabin." I stayed silent. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just let the words settle in my chest like stones. Minutes later, the buyer's lawyer called, yelling so loud I could hear him through the phone even though my husband was holding it. "Why are the authorities here?" That's when the unease hit, slow and cold, like ice water filling my lungs. Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe, it helps me keep sharing more. The cabin wasn't just property. It was mine. My grandmother left it to me when I was 19, back when my husband and I were still dating. It sat on 3 acres of pine forest in the Blue Ridge Mountains, tucked away from the world like a secret. The floors creaked. The windows fogged in winter. There was no cell service, no internet, just silence and the smell of wood smoke. I used to go there when I needed to think, when the noise of my life got too loud. I'd sit on the porch with a mug of coffee and watch the mist roll through the trees. It was the only place I ever felt like myself. My husband knew that. He knew what it meant to me. But 2 weeks ago, he came home from work with that tight smile he always wore when he was hiding something. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, loosened his tie, and said, "I've been thinking. That cabin of yours, it's just sitting there. We could use the money. The market's good right now." I looked up from the book I was reading. My stomach tightened. "The cabin's not for sale," I said. He shrugged like I'd just told him the weather was cloudy. "I already talked to a realtor. Guy says we could get 70, maybe 80,000 for it. Cash deal. No inspections. Easy." I put the book down. "You can't sell it. It's mine." He laughed, a short, dry sound. "Legally, it's ours. Community property, sweetheart." I checked. That word, sweetheart, felt like a slap. I wanted to throw the book at him. I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I just stared at him until he looked away. A week later, he invited his whole family over for Sunday dinner. I didn't know why. I made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. His mother showed up in her church dress, his brother in a golf shirt, his sister with her loud laugh and her 3 kids running wild through the house. We sat around the table, and I felt something off in the air, something rehearsed. My husband cleared his throat. "I've got some good news," he said, grinning. "I sold the cabin. 75,000. Cash buyer. Deal closed yesterday." The room exploded. His mother gasped and clapped her hands. His brother raised his beer. His sister said, "Finally." That old place was falling apart anyway. I sat frozen, fork halfway to my mouth. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might pass out. He looked at me, still grinning, and said, "Dinner's covered from the sold cabin." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at him, and I think he saw something in my eyes that made his smile falter. But then his mother kissed his cheek and the moment passed. I excused myself to the kitchen. I stood by the sink, gripping the counter, trying to breathe. I could hear them laughing in the other room, toasting to his smart move, to the money, to the future. I felt like I was drowning. That cabin was the last piece of my grandmother I had left. She raised me after my parents died. She taught me how to bake bread, how to read the stars, how to be quiet and still and listen to the world. When she died, she left me that cabin in her will. Not to my husband. Not to our kids. To me. And now it was gone. I walked back into the dining room. I didn't sit down. I just stood there, and they all looked at me like I was interrupting. You had no right, I said. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. My husband frowned. We talked about this. No, I said. You talked. I said no. And you did it anyway. His mother leaned forward. Honey, he's just trying to provide for the family. You should be grateful. I turned to her. Grateful? He sold something that wasn't his to sell. His brother laughed. Come on, it's just a cabin. You barely go there anymore. I felt tears burn behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. It was mine, I said. It was the only thing in this world that was just mine. My husband stood up. Enough. The deal's done. Move on. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw nothing. No guilt. No regret. Just impatience. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said. And I walked out of the room. I went upstairs to our bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My phone buzzed. I thought it was one of the kids. But it wasn't. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Mrs. Calloway? A man's voice, sharp and angry. This is Thomas Greer. I'm the attorney for the buyer of your property. Why the hell are the authorities at the cabin right now? I blinked. What? The sheriff's department. They showed up an hour ago. They're saying the sale is invalid. They're threatening to arrest my client for trespassing. What kind of game are you playing? I stood up. My pulse quickened. I didn't call anyone. Then who did? I didn't answer. I just hung up. My mind was racing. I hadn't called the authorities. I hadn't done anything. But someone had. And whoever it was had just thrown a wrench into my husband's smug little victory. I walked back downstairs. The family was still at the table, still laughing, still celebrating. My husband looked up when I entered. Feel better? He asked. I didn't answer. I just stared at him until the room went quiet. The buyer's lawyer just called, I said. The authorities are at the cabin. They're saying the sale is invalid. His face went pale. What? You heard me. His brother leaned back in his chair. What did you do? I smiled, cold and sharp. Nothing. Yet. My husband stood up so fast his chair tipped over. You can't do this. The deal's done. The money's in the account. Is it? I asked. He pulled out his phone, fingers shaking as he scrolled. His face went from pale to red. What the hell is this? I didn't move. What does it say? He turned the screen toward me. The account was frozen. A message in bold letters, pending investigation. His mother gasped. His sister grabbed her kids. His brother cursed under his breath. My husband looked at me like I'd just stabbed him. You did this. No, I said softly. You did this when you thought you could take what was mine. Before I continue, you need to subscribe to Revenge Dark Story channel because what I'm about to reveal will shock you. Hit that subscribe button now. I walked past him, grabbed my coat from the hallway, and headed for the door. Where are you going? He shouted. I turned back. To my cabin. You can't. It's sold. I smiled. We'll see. I drove through the night, 3 hours of winding mountain roads, my headlights cutting through the dark. I didn't know what I'd find when I got there. I didn't know if the authorities were still there, or the buyer, or anyone. But I needed to see it. I needed to stand on that porch one more time. When I pulled up, the cabin was dark. No cars. No lights. Just silence. I got out and walked up the steps. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The smell hit me first, pine and dust and memory. I stood in the middle of the living room, and I felt my grandmother's presence like a hand on my shoulder. I wasn't alone. I walked to the back room, the one my grandmother used as her study. The floorboards creaked under my feet. I knelt down and pried up the loose board in the corner, the one she'd shown me when I was a girl. Underneath was a metal box. I lifted it out, brushed off the dust, and opened it. Inside was a stack of papers. Deeds. Contracts. Letters. And a note in my grandmother's handwriting. To my granddaughter. This land has been in our family for 4 generations. It cannot be sold without the consent of the matriarch. The deed is in your name alone. Protect it. I read the words twice. My heart pounded. My husband hadn't just sold my cabin. He'd sold land that legally couldn't be sold without my written consent. The sale was void. The buyer had no claim. And my husband had just committed fraud. I sat back on my heels, holding the box, and I laughed. Not a happy laugh. A dark, bitter, victorious laugh. He thought he was smart. He thought he could take what was mine and get away with it. But he didn't know my grandmother. And he didn't know me. I'm reading and replying to every comment under this post. Tell me, would you have stayed silent, or confronted him right there in front of everyone? I need to know what you would have done, because what happens next will test everything I thought I knew about revenge and justice. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now, you won't want to miss how this ends. I locked the cabin behind me and drove back home. It was almost dawn when I pulled into the driveway. The house was dark. I walked inside. My husband was asleep on the couch, still in his clothes, an empty whiskey bottle on the floor. I stood over him, holding the metal box. I didn't wake him. I just watched him sleep, this man I'd spent 38 years with, this stranger who thought he could erase me. I went upstairs, packed a bag, and left. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out the door and didn't look back. Because some betrayals don't deserve explanations. They deserve silence. And consequences. I didn't go far. Just a motel 20 minutes outside town, the kind with peeling paint and a neon sign that flickered through the night. I paid cash for 3 days. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and cheap detergent, but I didn't care. I sat on the edge of the bed, the metal box beside me, and I stared at the documents until the words blurred. My grandmother's handwriting. Her signature. Proof that my husband had stolen from me. Proof that he'd broken the law. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, thinking, planning, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. By the time the sun came up, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Before I go any further, drop a comment and tell me what you'd do if someone you trusted for decades betrayed you like this. And if this story is hitting you hard, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. I called a lawyer first thing Monday morning. Not just any lawyer. Diane Mercer. She'd handled my grandmother's estate years ago, and she was known for being ruthless. I met her at her office downtown, a sleek glass building that made me feel small and out of place. But when I showed her the documents, her eyes lit up. This is airtight, she said, flipping through the pages. Your husband forged your signature on the sale agreement. The deed was never in his name. This sale is completely invalid. I nodded. Can we undo it? She smiled, sharp and cold. We can do more than that. We can file criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and theft. He could face jail time. I felt a strange satisfaction hearing those words. Do it, I said. She leaned back in her chair. Are you sure? This will destroy him. His reputation, his career, everything. I thought about the way he'd looked at me across that dinner table. The way his family had laughed. The way he'd said, "Move on," like I was the one being unreasonable. "I'm sure," I said. The lawsuit moved fast. Within 2 days, my husband received the papers. I wasn't there when it happened, but his brother called me, screaming into the phone. "What the hell is wrong with you? You're trying to put him in prison?" I didn't raise my voice. "He stole from me. It's a marriage. You share everything." "Not my inheritance," I said. "Not what my grandmother left me." He cursed and hung up. I blocked his number. I blocked all of them. His mother tried to show up at the motel, but the front desk turned her away. I could see her through the window, pacing in the parking lot, her face red and furious. She stood there for 20 minutes before finally getting back in her car and driving away. His sister left voicemails, calling me selfish, cruel, vindictive. I deleted them without listening all the way through. I didn't owe them explanations. I didn't owe them anything. You need to understand something. When people take what's yours and call it love, call it marriage, call it family, they're counting on you staying quiet. They're betting you won't fight back. Subscribe to Revenge Dark Story now, because I'm about to show you what happens when you stop being quiet. 3 weeks later, the court hearing arrived. I dressed carefully that morning. Navy blue dress, simple jewelry, my grandmother's silver bracelet. I wanted to look composed, calm, untouchable. When I walked into the courtroom, my husband was already there with his lawyer, a slick man in an expensive suit who looked annoyed. My husband wouldn't look at me. His face was pale, his hands clenched on the table. Good. Let him squirm. The judge was a woman in her 60s with gray hair pulled back tight and eyes that missed nothing. She read through the case summary, flipping pages slowly. The silence in the courtroom was thick, oppressive. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking, could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then she looked up. "Mr. Calloway, did you or did you not forge your wife's signature on the sale documents for the property located at 1247 Blue Ridge Lane?" His lawyer started to answer, but the judge cut him off. "I'm asking your client." My husband cleared his throat. "I thought it was community property. I thought I had the right." "That's not what I asked," the judge said. "Did you forge her signature?" Silence. Long and heavy. Finally, he nodded. "Yes." The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath. The judge set down her papers. "The sale is void. The property reverts to Mrs. Calloway's sole ownership. Additionally, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Fraud, forgery, and theft are serious crimes, Mr. Calloway." His lawyer stood up, sputtering about intent and misunderstandings, but the judge wasn't having it. She banged her gavel. "This hearing is adjourned." I stood up, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. My husband finally looked at me. His eyes were red. "Please," he said. "Don't do this." I walked past him without stopping. Outside the courthouse, Diane was waiting. "You won," she said. "Completely." I nodded. "What happens now?" "The DA will decide whether to press charges. Given the evidence, it's likely. He'll probably try to negotiate a plea deal." "And if he doesn't?" She smiled. "Then he goes to trial." "And he loses." I thought about that. 38 years of marriage, ending in a courtroom. Ending with him behind bars, maybe. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt something other than this cold, quiet satisfaction. But I didn't. I felt free. The next morning, I drove back to the cabin. The buyer had vacated, his lawyer threatening a lawsuit that would go nowhere. The property was mine again. I stood on the porch, the morning sun filtering through the trees, and I felt my grandmother with me again. I could almost hear her voice. "You did good, girl. Don't ever let anyone take what's yours." I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. The old furniture, the stone fireplace, the books on the shelves. I walked through each room, running my fingers along the walls, breathing in the scent of pine and memory. This was mine. It had always been mine. And no one would ever take it again. I spent the next few days cleaning, sweeping out the dust, airing out the rooms. I found old photographs in a drawer, pictures of my grandmother when she was young, standing in front of this very cabin with her arms crossed and a proud smile on her face. She'd built this place with her own hands after my grandfather died. She'd raised my mother here. She'd raised me here, in the summers, teaching me how to be strong. How to stand up for myself. How to never let anyone make me small. I'd forgotten those lessons somewhere along the way. I'd let my husband make decisions. I'd let him take control. I'd stayed quiet when I should have screamed. But not anymore. I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun set behind the mountains, and I made a promise to myself. I would never be silent again. I would never let anyone steal pieces of me and call it compromise. A week later, my husband's lawyer called. He wants to talk, he said. He's willing to drop any countersuits if you agree not to pursue criminal charges. I almost laughed. No. Mrs. Calloway, be reasonable. He's your husband. You've been together almost 40 years. He stopped being my husband the moment he forged my name, I said. Tell him I'll see him in court. I hung up. Diane called an hour later. The DA is moving forward. Trial set for October. Good, I said. She paused. You know this is going to get ugly. His lawyers will try to paint you as vindictive, as someone who's using the law for revenge. I thought about that word. Revenge. Maybe that's what this was. But it was also justice. It was also me taking back what was mine. Let them try, I said. I want to know something from you. Do you think I'm going too far? Or do you think he deserves everything coming to him? Comment below and let me know. And if you're still watching, if this story has grabbed you, subscribe now because the ending is going to hit harder than you expect. The trial happened in early October. The leaves were turning, gold and red and orange, and the mountain air was crisp and clean. I drove to the courthouse alone. My kids had called, trying to mediate, trying to get me to drop the charges. He's our father, my daughter said. You're tearing this family apart. He did that, I told her. Not me. She hung up crying. My son didn't call at all. I didn't blame them. They were caught in the middle, and that wasn't fair. But I couldn't stop. Not now. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution laid out the evidence. The forged signature. The fraudulent sale. The money he'd tried to hide in a separate account. My husband's lawyer tried to argue that it was a misunderstanding, that he believed he had the legal right. But the deed was clear. The will was clear. My grandmother's letter was read aloud in court, and I watched the jury's faces as they heard her words. This land cannot be sold without the consent of the matriarch. By the 3rd day, it was over. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 18 months in prison, with the possibility of parole after 12. His lawyer asked for leniency. The judge denied it. You violated your wife's trust and broke the law, she said. Actions have consequences. I sat in the gallery and watched him being led away in handcuffs. He looked back at me once, his face hollow and broken. I didn't look away. I didn't cry. I just watched until he disappeared through the door. Then I stood up and walked out into the October sun. I drove back to the cabin that afternoon. I didn't go back to the house we'd shared. I didn't want anything from that life anymore. I called a moving company and had them pack up my things. Clothes, books, a few pieces of furniture that had been mine before the marriage. Everything else, I left. His family could fight over it. I didn't care. The cabin became my home. I fixed it up slowly, room by room. I replaced the old windows, feeling the weight of each pane as I fitted them into place. I repainted the walls in soft greens and warm creams, colors my grandmother would have loved. I built a garden in the clearing behind the house, planting tomatoes and herbs and flowers my grandmother used to grow. Lavender, rosemary, marigolds. Each seed I planted felt like an act of reclamation, of putting roots down in soil that was truly mine. I started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. Stories, memories, reflections. I wrote about my grandmother. I wrote about betrayal and survival. I wrote about learning to be whole again after someone tries to break you. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. I filled notebook after notebook, sitting by the fire at night, the only sound the crackling wood and the scratch of pen on paper. Winter came, and the cabin filled with snow. I chopped wood for the fireplace, feeling the satisfying thunk of the axe-splitting logs. I made soup and bread, kneading dough with my hands until my arms ached. I read by the fire at night, wrapped in blankets, listening to the wind in the trees. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was free. My kids reached out eventually. My daughter first, tentative and careful. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," she said. "I didn't understand." "It's okay," I told her. "You're his daughter. You love him. That's not wrong." "Do you still love him?" she asked. I thought about it. 38 years. 2 children. A lifetime of memories, good and bad. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I love myself more. And that's what matters." She cried a little. We talked for an hour. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. She promised to visit in the spring, to see the cabin, to understand why I'd fought so hard for it. I told her I'd like that. My son took longer. He showed up at the cabin one afternoon in early spring, unannounced. I was outside planting when I heard his truck pull up. He got out slowly, hands in his pockets, looking uncertain. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Hey," I said. We stood there for a moment, the silence awkward and heavy. Then he said, "I talked to Dad. In prison." I didn't say anything. He told me what he did. All of it. He said he was wrong. I leaned on my shovel. "And what do you think?" He looked at the cabin, at the garden, at me. "I think you deserved better." I nodded. "Yeah. I did." He helped me plant the rest of the garden that day. We didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. By the time he left, something had shifted. We were going to be okay. I'm reading every single comment. Tell me honestly, do you think forgiveness is possible after something like this? Or are some betrayals too deep to ever heal? Let me know what you think. And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, subscribe so you never miss another story like this. A year later, my husband was released on parole. I heard about it from Diane. "He's asking if he can see you," she said. "Do you want me to arrange it?" "No," I said. "I don't have anything to say to him. He says he's changed. He's been in therapy. He wants to apologize." I looked out the window at the mountains, at the life I'd built without him. "Maybe he has changed," I said. "But that doesn't mean I owe him forgiveness." Diane was quiet for a moment. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." I smiled. I had a good teacher. I never saw him again. I heard he moved to another state, started over somewhere far away. I hoped he found peace. I hoped he learned something. But that wasn't my responsibility anymore. My responsibility was to myself, to this land, to the life my grandmother had entrusted to me. The seasons changed. Summer brought heat and wildflowers. I hiked the trails around the cabin, trails I'd walked with my grandmother as a child. I swam in the creek, the cold water shocking and clean. I invited my daughter and her family up for a week. My grandchildren ran through the trees, their laughter echoing through the forest. I taught them how to fish, how to identify birds, how to be still and listen. I told them stories about their great-great-grandmother, about the woman who built this place with her own hands. I wanted them to know where they came from. I wanted them to understand that strength runs in their blood. Fall came again, and with it, a sense of completion. I stood on the porch one October morning, a year and a half after the trial, and I realized I'd stopped thinking about my husband. I'd stopped being angry. I'd stopped carrying him around like a weight on my shoulders. He was just a person I used to know. A mistake I'd made and corrected. Nothing more. The cabin is mine. The land is mine. My life is mine. And no one, not my husband, not his family, not anyone, will ever take that from me again. Some people say I went too far. That I should have forgiven him, should have let it go, should have kept the family together. But those people don't understand what it's like to have the only thing that's truly yours stolen from you. They don't understand what it's like to be silenced, dismissed, erased. I'm not sorry for what I did. I'm not sorry for fighting back. And if I had to do it all over again, I'd make the same choice. Because the lesson here is simple. When someone tries to take what's yours, when they lie and cheat and expect you to stay quiet, you don't owe them mercy. You owe yourself justice. You owe yourself the courage to stand up and say, "This is mine, and you can't have it." That's the lesson my grandmother taught me. That's the lesson I'm teaching my children. And that's the lesson I hope you take with you today. Stand up for what's yours. Fight for what matters. And never, ever let anyone make you small. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm reading every comment, so tell me what you think. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because stories like this, stories about real people fighting back and reclaiming their power, they matter. And I'll keep telling them as long as you keep listening.